Gather round, boys and girls, gather round, ladies and gentlemen, gather round, people of all ages, for that we're about to delve into the world of the strange, the mysterious and the frightening. This is Jinn Stories, and I'm your host Abdul Kareem, and today we're going to be completing the saga of Brother. This story began so long ago in Kenya. It was so long ago it didn't even have a name as Kenya. It was just a part of the British Empire. And it's going to be completed in the 20th century. Now, in all fairness, we do not know that these events happened in regards to this entity known as Brother, but just for the sake of argument, we will assume that just for today's speech. So this takes place in England. This is when my parents, my grandmother and myself, now at the time I was only 4 years old. I was a wee little lad, and we were going along, and my dad had a meeting in Manchester, and so my grandmother came along because she had wanted to deliver something to somebody in Manchester and they figured, kill two birds with one stone. So they take a drive up to Manchester, and they arrive there and they stay overnight in a hotel because it's a long drive from where they live. It's like almost 3 hours. So they stayed at the hotel, and my parents had an address book. They made sure it was in their bag. They made sure it was kept neatly, safely. And me and my grandmother were in the other room. Now I was very young. I was maybe like 3 or 4 at the time. I do not remember this event, but this event had been told to me by my mother, my father, and my grandmother. You see, this is actually 2 stories. The first story takes place in mine and my grandmother's bedroom. My grandmother's sitting there, she's watching TV, getting all comfy and settled in for the night. And then she catches sight of something out the window. She's like, what the hell? So she gets up, goes to the window, opens the curtains, and she sees a sight which makes her heart nearly stop. What is the sight, you may ask? It is a ball of white fire. It's coming straight towards them. It just barely glances the bell tower opposite the hotel, and then it flies makes a beeline straight towards their hotel bedroom window. And fearing for her life, she runs towards me, she grabs me, and she's like squeezing me hard, and the ball of fire hits the window. And there's not even a sound of broken glass. There's a flash of white light. And the white light coalesces and reforms into the shape of a tiny white man. Now, she described it to me. I remember my grandmother had poor use of English, so she described this white man as just being a short, strange looking janine. It was humanoid in shape, and it ran towards us. Grabbing me, she said, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim, A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim," and it hit like a barrier in the air. It couldn't go past that barrier. We were protected by the power of A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim. And this thing, it wouldn't come within a foot of us. And so it ran around us, trying to find a penetration into our defense. But there was nowhere that they could enter the faith in my grandmother's heart. Fearing for our life, she held me until eventually the janine, the thing, gave up and it went into the bathroom. Now after half an hour, she loosened her grip on me and she said, "Stay here, son. Stay here, grandson." And then she went into the bathroom. In the bathroom, there was nothing. The janine had vanished into the air. Now, let's take place in the second room. So the rest of the story takes place in the other bedroom. You see, that's where my parents were staying, and they did not know about the events of that night. In fact, my grandmother never even mentioned a word. She never even mentioned a word of this strange event until I was almost 30 years old. She mentioned it to me. But we're going off topic, so let's go back to the main topic here. In my parents' bedroom, they woke up early in the morning. My dad had the meeting, and they had about 20 minutes before they had to leave. That was when they were going to get late, as if they stayed in more than 20 minutes. So my mother goes into her purse. She looks for the address book. She can't find it. They look everywhere. They tear the room apart. Pillows are on the floor. The mattress is sideways. The room is torn upside down. they can't find the address book. So they leave the hotel room apologizing for the mess they left it in and say to the guy at the front desk, if you find this address book, it's small and brown, please let us know, it's so important. So they left the hotel that morning, nearly getting late, but my father made it to his meeting. And after the meeting, they didn't even know the address my grandmother needed to go to. But with intuition and will, they came to a street. It was just the next street over from where they needed to be. They opened the window and just said, do you know where this street is? And the guy's like, oh yeah, it's just that street opposite. Just that street on the other side. So they went to the other side, went to the person's house, knocked on the door, and it happened to be the first house they went to, and it was the right person. So my grandmother was happy, my parents were happy. So they go home, and the story turns all well and nice. Until a few weeks later, they come home one day after a busy Saturday shopping, and they see a strange brown object on the table. They walk towards it, and to their surprise, on a Saturday, without receiving any mail, is their address book on the table. Strangely enough, reminds me of an event that happened almost over a century beforehand with my great-great-great-grandfather, who had the similar events with a being called Brother, which was a Janine.